Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today I'm going to be tackling another patron request, this time coming from patron Jackie, who wanted me to watch and review the 1980 classic Terror Train. Now, I say that this is a classic, but at the same time, I also had not yet ever seen this one. And the reason that she picked this one is, according to her, this might be one of the only films that I desperately want to see remade. I have some good news for you, Jackie. Apparently, a remake is happening and is actually going to be released next month on Shudder. So happy little surprise there, but what did I actually think of this 1980 version? Let's find out. Directed by Roger Spottiswoode and written by T.Y. Drake, Daniel Grodnick, and Judith Raskow, this is a movie that is basically a slasher, and it takes place on a train. A bunch of college kids, after a beginning sequence in which a prank has gone wrong and somebody gets hurt, institutionalized possibly, rumors are abound, but nevertheless, something really bad happens. We fast forward in time, and they are having their senior party, one last hurrah, as they're about to graduate medical school, on a train of all things. It's something that somebody had the idea for, to book a train for just a little back and forth kind of excursion with a bar cart and a magician and the whole bit. And of course, like a lot of these movies, the beginning sequence comes back to haunt them all as somebody boards the train that isn't supposed to be there. This is apparently a bit of a costume party, so one of the kind of fun little things about Terror Train is that the killer repeatedly changes masks as he claims new victims, so it's impossible to tell who they are at any given point. It's a fun little gimmick that kind of adds to the mystery of the whole thing, not in terms of like who's doing all this stuff, it's pretty easy to discern that, but more who at any given point in any given scene might be the killer. And of course, this movie stars the iconic Scream Queen herself, Jamie Lee Curtis, right smack dab in the middle of like her core-centric grouping of cool killer slasher movies that she did, starting with Halloween in 1978, Prom Night in 1980, The Fog in 1980, Road Games in 1981, this film, and then Halloween 2 in 1981. So just in a 3-year time span, just a whole slew of slashers. And she brings something special to the screen here in Terror Train. I think that she plays a character that is a little bit more independent, a little bit more intelligent, a little bit less just kind of wrong place, wrong time, survivor girl kind of thing, but is actually a character unto her own that's a little bit more than just a blank slate. And of course, she brings the Scream Queen pedigree to life in this film with some actually genuinely blood-curdling screams in this film. And also starring in this movie, kind of interestingly, was David Copperfield in his only non-self-played role in any film ever, in which he plays the magician that was hired to perform for these college students. And we get a lot of his illusions and sleight of hand and so forth play out during the course of this movie. So overall, what did I think of this film? Middle of the road, in all honesty. I enjoyed it. I did. I think that it's something that I will be recommending, broadly to the channel here, to you, the viewer, as well as to anybody else that comes at me asking about, a solid 1980s slasher movie. I still think that, for my money, one of the best examples of one of those kind of, low-key, not Jason, not Freddy, kind of, slasher recommendations is still going to be The Burning. But I do think that this one is kind of right up there. For me, having the setting on the train was an interesting little, I guess it's a gimmick, and so was the whole thing with the mask and mask switching and so forth. I think that that's kind of the thing about this movie, is I found it to be pretty middle of the road as far as a horror slasher movie goes, but I think that the gimmicks were kind of stacked on top of each other to elevate it into something a little bit more than the sum of its parts. If I had to have any major complaints about this film as a horror fan, it's that the kills themselves were, I wouldn't say necessarily lackluster, it's just that they oftentimes took place off screen. They were implied, or you would see the weapon come down, something like that, but the actual contact wouldn't really be made on camera. There was still some gruesome elements to it, but it was usually after the fact, the bodies found, things like that. which is fun, but I think that the practical effects gorehound in me found something just a little bit unsatisfying about that. Additionally, I did find it to just be a little bit eye-rolling. Trying to judge a film for the product of its time becomes a little bit difficult when viewing it through the modern lens, but even so, the fact that it actually took some fairly problematic tropes in terms of the nature of the villain, I'm not marking it down any points for that, but even so, it's like, another one of these. It kind of felt like it was this weird in-between place where it wasn't quite a modern slasher, or, slasher as we came to know them in the 80s. But at the same time, it was kind of drifting away, but still had some pedigree, some roots buried in kind of the exploitation films of the 1970s. And you can see some of those elements brought forth there, and not all of them are the most flattering thing. Even so, even though they shared the setting, I would have to say that I found this to be a whole lot more palatable than the film Late Night Trains. This really did feel more like a slasher through and through. It's just, some of those elements did kind of hold over. The notion of it being set on the train was kind of clever. It added a whole lot of different complexities and oddities to the whole thing, like the fact that you really couldn't just leave. And that's actually something that I mentioned quite a bit in horror films. One of the best things you can do as a filmmaker is to isolate the terror. And this did a fairly effective job of that by preventing anybody from just, noping out. Additionally, we did have kind of this situation where, it wasn't just this wide open field where anybody could go anywhere. If the killer was in the middle car and you were, needing to get from one end of the train to the other, then you would have to pass by them. So, it kind of had some interesting geographical oddities with that, too. And I thought that that really served the movie well. And one thing that this film did do very well was set up those different geographical visual elements. So at any given point, you really could tell where a person was on the train just by the visual cues of their surroundings, the lighting schemes, the decorations, things like that. And that made it so that it wasn't so terribly confusing to watch. It really does help, even if you're not really registering it on a conscious level, to understand that if somebody is in the front of the train, the killer's back here, where are they in relation to each other? And those visual cues provided that in a way that I thought worked very effectively. I mentioned earlier that I still kind of hold in high esteem The Burning, and one of the things that I loved about that was that it actually sold itself well to me as a summer camp movie, aside from the fact that the horror elements were happening there. I actually kind of was invested in the characters, invested in the setting, and the activities that they were going through and the conflicts that they were having. And I think that to a degree, not to the full extent, but to a degree, held true for Terror Train with me as well. What the characters are going through, what Jamie Lee Curtis was going through with her boyfriend and his friend and things like that, I found to be very effective, and I believed it, and I was kind of invested in it. And that's something that I honestly really never got out of franchises like Friday the 13th, which, Cards on the Table, I know I actually haven't reviewed any of those films on this channel, but Cards on the Table, not my favorite thing in the world. I found them to be fairly bland, milquetoast, not a whole lot actually going on in the characters beyond the kills. And I really can't say the same for Terror Train. I actually did find stuff to latch onto with the characters beyond the kills. So overall, I found this to be a fairly effective 1980s slasher film, and I am very intrigued by what they're going to be doing in the remake that comes out a month from now on Shudder. So thank you to Jackie for recommending this one to me. I'm very glad that I watched it. It's another little 1980s check mark for me. And thank you for watching this video out there. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll talk to you soon. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and run it.